Greetings, everyone. Here are the video's main points. Ukraine leaves only one final escape route, a harsh ultimatum on the Geomio Peninsula. There is nowhere to escape, a brutal manhunt in the skies over Kherson. The energy knockout blow, Ukraine suffocates Moscow's last two oil refining strongholds. Black clouds blaze over Moscow, the rage shatters Mr. Putin's illusion of safety. With the blockade in place, Ukraine tightens its hold as Moscow's capital region is consumed by fire and gunfire. Welcome to the analysis program of Luanban Xiansu. Before we get into the content, please take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue. Thank you, dear audience. Ukraine has left only one way out for the Russians to escape from Geomio. The invaders are running out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, a brutal battlefield. In southern Ukraine, the Geomio Peninsula is not simply an isolated military target, but it is the heart, the logistics hub, and the decisive factor for the Kremlin's forces on the battlefield. Expert Oleksandr Kovalenko said that this area serves as a vital relay station, directly affecting the resilience of the entire Russian force spread across the southern region. Kiev's strategic intention has become clear. Completely isolating this peninsula means breaking every supply line running through these strategic routes, cutting off reinforcements from the Koai-My bridge across the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, and extending to Berdyansk and Mariupol. Once this corridor is broken, the entire Russian military front here will face the risk of a cascading collapse. To realize that pivotal goal, Ukrainian defense forces have quietly but resolutely launched a large-scale attrition campaign right in the enemy's rear area. The strategic routes stretching from the mainland through Rostov-on-Don, Mariupol, Berdyansk to Melitopol, and the gateways leading into Crimea are continuously subjected to long-range fire. The dominance of Ukrainian drones in the sky has turned fuel trucks and military transport vehicles into blazing torches, making the land corridor a genuine death corridor. Not only are the land roads choked off, but the terrifying pressure has also expanded to the sea and railway infrastructure. Russia's maritime transport has been badly damaged after 3 large ferries carrying vehicles were sunk at the port of Kavkaz, reducing the fleet from 7 at the year's start to possibly only 2 still in operation. Russia's once famous Black Sea Fleet has also suffered heavy losses in the number of warships due to relentless attacks by suicide boats. Meanwhile, on land, the railway network connecting the mainland to the peninsula has been repeatedly paralyzed by attacks destroying the bridges over the North Crimean Canal. The logistical deadlock grew clearer when the Ukrainian army planted their flag on the Kinburn Spit, the westernmost point on the Dnipro River in Russian-controlled territory. Although the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, Mr. Dmytro Pletenchuk, affirmed that this area is still a fierce battlefield and cannot yet be considered a solid foothold for the complete liberation of southern Kherson. But the presence of Kiev's forces at this strategic location is a heavy blow to the enemy's morale, demonstrating that the noose is tightening around the coastal corridor. Amid the tightening siege, the bridge megaproject, a symbol of President Vladimir Putin, is currently the only remaining supply route that still maintains relative stability, but it itself is also having to bear severe technical limitations. The aftermath of the shocking attacks in recent years has left critical scars on the bridge's structure, causing the damaged spans to always be at risk of collapsing. To protect this fragile lifeline, the Russian railway sector has fully banned fuel-carrying trains from crossing, unintentionally causing a major fuel supply bottleneck for both military and civilian needs on the peninsula. Now, every time the air raid siren sounds, the bridge has to be completely closed for hours, only allowing small personal vehicles to pass. According to a report from the Office of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, cited by Liga News Agency, this controlled escalation of pressure has pushed the peninsula into a deep internal crisis. A state of emergency has been declared, leading to security checkpoints along the roads, severe fuel shortages, long lines of vehicles waiting at gas stations, the rise of the black market, and continuous power outages and disruptions to public transportation. Although it cannot yet be declared that Crimea is completely isolated, the harsh reality shows that time is running out for Russian forces, as Ukraine seems to be leaving only one escape route for the opponent to withdraw before the final blockade is put in place. Russian FPV drones have turned frontline cities into adventure tourism zones. The nature of attrition warfare and the strategy of grinding down the enemy, the mentality that the Kremlin applies, is not a new doctrine. It was already shaped during the brutal campaigns in Chechnya through bloody shelling of residential areas and crowded squares. However, in the digital age, this form of violence has evolved to a new, more horrifying level. With the emergence of extremely cheap first-person view, FPV drones, the Russian military has found an optimal tool to maintain continuous psychological and physical pressure on the enemy at minimal financial cost. This shift marks a tragic turning point on the battlefield. If in the early stages of the conflict, killer drones were deployed to hunt down heavily armored tanks, now, as Ukrainian parliamentarian Olesandra Ustinova grimly observed, each drone is relentlessly pursuing individual human lives. The port city of Kherson on the banks of the Dnipro River is being turned into a massive and tragic laboratory for Russia to test its doctrine of comprehensive urban siege. A heartbreaking tragedy that occurred right in the center of Kherson is clear evidence of this brutal strategy, when an FPV drone crashed directly into a minibus full of civilians, taking the lives of 2 people and seriously injuring 9 other passengers. This attack was not at all due to operator error or a random coincidence of stray fire, but was part of a calculated military plan that, under the leadership in Kyiv, has been exposed as a systematic manhunt campaign. Russian drone operators are continuously rotated and trained at this Kherson laboratory, where they hone their lethal skills directly on the bodies of real, flesh-and-blood people. Data from the Kherson region's military administration shows enemy drone sightings have dramatically increased, from 2,500 to 5,500 in just a single month. This terrible escalation has destroyed and disabled more than 230 civilian vehicles, as well as local emergency rescue vehicles. The methods of warfare here are not limited to direct airstrikes, but are even more sophisticated, such as remotely scattering anti-personnel mines disguised along major transportation routes or dropping incendiary mixtures onto poor residential areas. Every lifeline of the city has become a target for destruction, from public transportation vehicles, ambulances, rescue vehicles, to humanitarian aid convoys and postal vehicles. The scale of this terror policy has far exceeded the scope of ordinary war reports. The United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry must officially intervene and classify Russia's targeted attacks on pedestrians. Killing cyclists and rescue workers is murder, a crime against humanity. Vice magazine's analysis shows the strategic purpose behind these crimes is clear. It is to spread extreme fear on a large scale, completely paralyze the civilian logistics system, and crush the people's will to hold on. Now, Russia is actively replicating this scorched earth model in a series of other hotspots along the extended front line. Similar scenes of devastation and danger are being reported in Nikopol, Sumy, Zaporizhia, as well as across the Donbas hotspot from Kostin, Typka, Harmatov to Slovian. Ukraine attacked the last 2 oil refineries supplying oil to Moscow and its surrounding areas. A paradoxical scenario, but one that truly reflects the harsh reality of the ongoing conflict right at the heart of Russia's energy center. A global oil superpower is now facing a serious fuel crisis right in the capital, Moscow, and its surrounding areas, as a result of Kyiv's asymmetric attack strategy targeting energy infrastructure. The Kremlin's deadlock is evident as they are forced to open negotiations, seeking preferential priced oil and gasoline supplies from abroad, even having to import gasoline from India by sea to ease the domestic fuel shortage. According to leaked sources, at least 60,000 tons of gasoline have been loaded onto 2 oil tankers, each with a capacity of 30,000 to 40,000 tons, to be urgently shipped to Russian ports. This is the clearest evidence showing how deeply Ukraine's economic and military pressure is strangling the opponent's strategic resources. The energy supply network for the Russian capital region used to be a closed and sophisticated system, but now its backbone links are being systematically severed. Expert Sergei Vakulenko from the Carnegie Center points out that the fuel supply lifeline for Moscow depends on a pipeline transporting oil products from 3 major refineries, Nizhny Novgorod, Ryazan, and Yaroslavl, combined with the local facility, the Kapotnya oil refinery. Now that logistical picture has taken on a tragic tone as columns of smoke and fire continuously erupt. The Kropotnia refinery, which used to handle 20 to 35% of the fuel demand for the entire capital region, has been forced to completely halt its oil refining operations after consecutive attacks, and there is almost no hope of recovery before the end of this year. Meanwhile, the Ziazan plant has been paralyzed, while the Zaroslavl facility has been continuously targeted by relentless airstrikes. The recent decisive attack on the Nizhegorod-Neptel City refinery complex, which belongs to the Nukoy Group, also known as the Neos Nozosi superplant in Chitobo City, Nizhny Novgorod province, was the final blow to a system that had already been operating at the limits of its endurance. The red flames and massive explosions here have officially signaled Ukraine's efforts to neutralize the enemy's last two remaining oil refining strongholds. As the fourth largest in the entire federation and holding up to 11% of the country's total output, Neos Nozos plays a vital role in compensating for the shortage left by the Kropotnia plant. A precision drone strike targeting the primary distillation towers destroyed a workshop responsible for a quarter of the plant's total capacity. This forced the giant facility to cut output or temporarily shut down. This caused turmoil in the domestic market, with gasoline prices soaring at capital region gas stations. Especially concerning was the risk of paralyzing key air traffic routes due to a severe shortage of aviation fuel for aircraft fleets. On the Kyiv 24 television channel, military expert Ivan Stilpak analyzed that the Russian authorities are caught in a dilemma, having to concentrate all remaining resources and fuel to prioritize Moscow's stability, while accepting to overlook and sacrifice the essential needs of other localities across the country. This inequality and scarcity have pushed the public into a state of panic, as reflected in numerous videos expressing anger and despair spreading across social media. This analyst also made a bitter comparison, noting that even during the darkest period when Ukraine faced a comprehensive fuel crisis caused by the war, their society never witnessed scenes of chaos, scrambling, or people siphoning fuel from others' cars like what is currently happening in Russia. The Kremlin is engaged in an internal war of attrition where both time and resources are limited. Ukrainian airstrikes on Moscow have embarrassed Putin. The anger of the people is truly frightening for the dictator. A hidden shockwave is quietly shaking the very foundation of Russian society, as shown by harsh statistics that are haunting the online space. The Yandex data search system has recorded an unprecedented record number with over 137,000 searches. User queries with the same question: when will Russia end the war against Ukraine? At the same time, the anti-war movement in Russia's local regions suddenly surged remarkably, with the number of articles criticizing the war increasing to 235 in just one short week. The public's anger and confusion are becoming a frightening psychological shadow for the Kremlin, directly exposing the wavering trust that people once had in the national defense system. This social rift is by no means a coincidence, but rather a direct result of Ukraine's calculated asymmetric strategy, carried out through a series of continuous drone attacks deep into Russian territory, with the capital region as the main focus. According to in-depth analysis from The Atlantic magazine, this long-range firepower campaign by Kyiv is shifting its focus to exerting direct political and economic pressure on President Vladimir Putin's regime, aiming to choke the Kremlin's war machine by cutting off financial sources, supply lines, and even manpower at their roots. By targeting these strategic structures, Ukraine is carrying out a calculated plan to create intolerable living conditions right under the dictator's nose, turning areas once considered inviolable into vulnerable targets for long-range firepower. The most vivid and tragic evidence of this multi-layered strategic move is the fierce attack on the major oil refinery right in Moscow. This carefully calculated attack ignited a fierce sea of fire, sending a massive column of thick black smoke rising into the sky above the capital, visible to millions of Moscow residents. Markiev's message was ruthless and made it clear that the days of thinking this war was distant are over. The era of being unaffected and enjoying a luxurious, peaceful life for the capital's elite has officially ended, and even the most vital economic lifelines can be burned down at any moment. This strike also pushes the Kremlin into a financially devastating geopolitical dilemma, where Russia's war economy depends almost entirely on exporting oil to the world. Now, to deal with the domestic fuel shortage that is fueling public discontent, if Mr. Putin chooses to limit exports to preserve domestic reserves, The flow of money into the treasury to sustain the war will dry up. The inevitable consequence is that the state will no longer have enough resources to maintain welfare and privileges for the people in need. These are the groups whose support the Russian leader desperately desires and strives to maintain at all costs. Not stopping at the economic front, the double blow directly targeting the core control center at the Space Information Center in Dubna has exposed a harsh truth about the superpower's defensive capabilities. Through the thunderous explosions at this top-secret space facility, the Ukrainian military has sent a strong warning that no shelter, no matter how advanced or deep within Russian territory, can guarantee safety from their reach. This signals a systemic collapse in Russia's military operations on the ground. Although the relentless airstrikes on Moscow have not yet forced Russia to lay down its arms and end the war, they have forever shattered the long-held illusion among the Russian people about a president who could provide absolute protection for the capital, the economy, and the nation's advanced military machine. So, in your opinion, will Ukraine's multi-layered attack strategy on Moscow force Putin to change his mind? Or will there be another wave of retaliation?